Hello, everybody. Well, thank you for coming out. So let's see. What I usually do is very little on the prepared talking business and much more in the Q&A. And the way I like to do the Q&A is it's called answering questions with stories. So you ask a question and then I have to tell a story inside the answer. I can't just, sort of pontificate on stuff. I have to say, these people did that and so on and so forth. And that turns out to be a really good way to kind of like address questions and stuff. Now I'm going to put my life in my hands and yours also by switching over and showing a bit of a PowerPoint because this is the stuff that I've been working on since about 2015, so 4 years now actually, which I call the Heart of Agile. So I'm going to kick over to a screen share, and if I do this right, you guys should see a little PowerPoint thing. The thing here is that since 2001, well, in 2001, we did a sort of a very strong simplification of everything and said you only need these 4 values, and if you had these 4 values, you could make good things happen. And we added 12 principles on top of that. And since 2001, Agile has become more and more and more complicated to the point that those of us who first made it kind of don't recognize it anymore. So in 2015, I did another re-simplification, and I call this the Heart of Agile. It's got these Japanese characters. The last character there is kokoro, which means heart or essence. So this is the heart or essence of Agile. And my point is that you really only need these 4 words, and the 4 words are collaborate, deliver, reflect, and improve. And the point of choosing these 4 words instead of the values of the manifesto is values are, they're a little bit soft and woolly, and yeah, we value individuals and interactions, and and what does that mean exactly? So on. With these 4 words, they're commands, right? They're imperatives. Collaborate, and if you think about it for more than a half a second, it's pretty obviously that if you collaborate better, things will go better, and if you collaborate worse, things will go worse. And delivery is not just one big delivery at the end, but we're delivering in lots of little pieces to get feedback on things, and we're trying to steer. Deliver, it's actually in a sense, deliver isn't quite the right word. I literally don't know what the right word is. But in a sense, in the early parts, we're probing the world. We're sticking our finger into the world to see how the world operates differently than whatever we thought of at the beginning. So that allows us to steer. We're really looking for bad news early. The earlier we get the bad news, the more money we save, the more time we have to change directions. Then that gives us the agility. And then people don't really stop and reflect. And so I put that one all in its own separate space. Like literally stop and reflect on what's going on, reflect on the collaboration, reflect on the delivery, reflect on what you're doing. And then, of course, improve all of the different pieces. What's been interesting since I did this in 2015 is the way that having just these 4 words in such a simple way, it takes Agile out of the software business, it takes it out of the product development business, and it takes it into any kind of initiative of any variety. So it's much bigger. My idea was to make it simpler, so don't worry about backlogs and sprints and scrum masters and what are the rules of the product owner and who could sit in a meeting. Just look for all the topics and ways that you can improve collaboration and all the things that are slowing down collaboration, and work on those independent of anything else. So in fact, by having just these 4 simple words, the topics actually get bigger, simpler, bigger, broader range of coverage and so on. Now, that's just the 4 words, and I can expand this out any number of levels. You can mind map this out for any number of levels. I just want to show that if you start to talk about collaboration in a generic sense, you have to talk about trust. And trust is a big topic, and there's lots of things buried inside of there. So if you're going to work on collaboration, you have to take on a very difficult topic of How do we improve trust? What are the inhibitors to trust? You have to talk about culture. There's specific movements for collaboration also. What's really interesting in here is when you talk about trust and culture and collaboration, you have to start talking about executive bonuses. You have to start talking about employee appraisal forms. HR gets into the mix really fast. All kinds of things that were previously outside of the discussion of Agile are now inside, and that's just good news. Inside of delivery, there's delivery for income, which is pretty obvious, but the thing that's new, so I would say in the last 3 years, is the idea of delivering partial deliveries for learning. So you actually, this is the probe the world thing, and on the internal flow, there's all the lean Kanban stuff. Inside reflecting, we're used to doing introspections, but now there are people who do, there's all the analytics data and so on. In the reflect and improve, we're bringing in psychology, we're bringing in solutions-focused psychotherapy as new ideas to enrich our vocabulary for different ways of working. So that's that. And I just want to show you, there's a guy in Serbia, his name's George Babic, and he just started, he literally went to his, the wall board, and he just put this up on their big whiteboard. And now at the time, collaboration is on the left. They put collaboration on the left instead of on the top, but that's okay. And so he was able to use the top thing to make a Kanban board for the delivery. So delivery was at the top in his drawing there. So he had a Kanban on the left. He had a small area for work in progress, the done. Inside collaboration, they put markers for dependencies on other teams. They put mood graphs. They put stuff. Inside reflect, they had team mood, insights, aha, stuff like that. And inside improve, they had initiatives. I just want to show you, that's where he started off. That was the first picture he took. And, sometime later, of course, the team had decorated it up and they had cards in different stages and different graphs showing what was going on. So a really good way to get started with this is literally just put up the diamond there, and just have an open discussion about those 4 words. We have a website now, heartofagile.com, and really that's really all I want to say. From a PowerPoint deck, because as I remind everybody all the time, there's just 4 words, and everything that I do and say on top of those 4 words is my interpretation, my interests, my decoration. Can you hear me okay still there?
Yeah.
All right, good deal. So now I took that off, and that way it's just the talking head again, and I can see you again, which I couldn't before. So we've got, it's really interesting. There's a number of meetups around the world. The first one was in Melbourne, Australia. I'm doing one in Brisbane now. We just started one in the Tampa area in Florida. Brussels was next. There's one in Serbia. There's one in Helsinki. There's one in Paris that's going strong now. They started one in Chile, in Santiago. They started one in Argentina, in Buenos Aires. And everybody says, so how do we get started? How do we get started with a meetup? And pretty much what they do is they put up the 4 words, and, if we had more time, if we had like an hour to play games, I would literally ask you guys to get into groups of 3, discuss anything that you've seen that has improved collaboration wherever you're working. So in the solutions focus style of work, we don't talk about problems. We talk about things that are already working that we can mimic and copy and amp up. That's the reflect, improve. That's the dominant strategy we're using. It borrows from clean language. It borrows from appreciative inquiry. But it's an official form of psychotherapy called solutions-focused psychotherapy that we're all busy trying to learn to use. So you can see we're bringing in new stuff. But if you just do that, if you have spare time, if you do this at your work, you do that in a retrospective, just ask these questions. How can we deliver less sooner to get more feedback, some kind of feedback so we can steer, right? Leave out all of the words of Agile, leave out all of the frameworks, and just go very pure discussion, right? You can see you don't need to be in software for this. You can do this in government. You can do this in literally any initiative. So that's how people are getting started. And I think we've got now 10 meetups around the world. So we're going to go to Vienna and have our very first leadership meeting and trying to get people from all parts of the globe. It's nearly impossible, but we're trying it. So that's what I've got to offer for you guys as thought-provoking for you guys to chew on, to try very specifically. Take a look at this and see what happens. There's really interesting. People just see the stickers. Some execs have just literally seen the sticker and said, I want that, bring that in here, right? All they know is those are good words to emphasize on. So that's all I have for the presentation part. And I'd move over to the questions part, if you like.
Thank you very much, Alistair. So we are now moving on to the interactive QA part. There is another mic, at the back there. So anyone? Tom? Yeah, sure. Have a question.
Hi, Alistair. Thank you very much for that. So before the meeting started, we did invite you to ask questions. We had a little survey that went out. And I'm just going to ask one of the questions that came from that, and that is, diverse teams have been shown to deliver better results. What have you done to derive diversity in your teams? That's regarding gender, ethnicity, background, and I guess those could enhance collaboration, possibly?
Yeah, so that's, let me pull two things together. We do an exercise in my classes where I go, list all the things that slow down the movement of ideas between minds, because the speed of a mental project is very much related to the speed at which ideas move between minds. And there's an interesting dichotomy that shows up, which is if you want ideas to move quickly between minds, you want the people with the most commonality in their background, people who've come from the same culture, been on the same projects, they have all this shorthand, and the ideas move very quickly. And as somebody pointed out, it also means that the pool of ideas you're drawing from shrinks as the people become more alike. If you want a broader range of ideas, then you have to increase diversity. So you have more different ideas coming in, and you also slow down the movement of ideas between minds. And then you have to take very specific actions to get people to learn to know each other, so they can exchange their ideas. So that's something we do in our classes that illustrates the difference between sort of speed efficiency in a project, which is the more similar people are, the faster the ideas move, and the broadening of the ideas, which is the opposite pole, which then grows from the diversity. The things that we do, I would say we've had three things that would count for your question. We've had a couple of conferences, Heart of Agile conferences in Pittsburgh. There have been 3 in a row. We've got the Heart of Agile meetups, and I'm now editing a journal, a special issue of a journal for on cutting edge of Agile. And my view, it seems to be correct, is you just absolutely have to hunt down the diversity that isn't natural to you. So, for example, on the organization committee for the Heart of Agile conference, I think it was something like 6 women and 2 men, so that was perfectly fine. And one of the number 2 person in the Heart of Agile organization is a woman from Argentina who's living in Brussels at the moment. So she actually represents both Latin America and Europe. So that's very cool. She's super well connected in Latin America and quite well connected in Europe right now. Her name is Soledad Pinter. So she was on the organizing committee. So we hunted specifically, and also given that 6 out of the 8 people on the organizing committee were women, it was very easy and natural for them to include Europeans and women and stuff like that inside the call for papers, the call for participation, the selection, right? Everything was then started to be blended. For the meetups around the world, I'm asking so let's just say one of you just said, hey, I want to really do a Heart of Agile meetup, here. We would say we would like a man and 1 woman from 2 different companies so that we get that mix. There's a change in the flavor of dialogue when you have a gender diverse group that we see. So that's what we do there. And for the special issue that I'm editing, the first 8 papers that came in were all men. And I went out to Twitter and said, I can't stand this, people. Please pass the word. I need submissions from women, Europeans, people of color, everything. And I now have a slight, I think I have a slight surplus of women, or it's very close to 50-50. But it's not accidental. It's very easy just to do the obvious thing and let the noisy white men send in their noisy things. I will say this, inside the Heart of Agile, there's only 4 words, but we're creating a culture. And someone said, what's the purpose of the Heart of Agile? What's your ultimate purpose? And I go, well, I don't have a purpose, because I can't leave this thing. I'm going to be stuck with this Heart of Agile probably for the rest of my life. What I really care about is that we don't poison the well, that the personality of the group is a nice personality. What I can say is I like working with these people. I would like that not to get ruined. So my goal, and that's my new purpose, if you will, is to create an organization which has a very particular tone of interaction, a very particular personality. Because once the personality of a group gets ruined, it's very difficult to fix it up. And so I'm finding the people in the group who have the tone, a very generous, sharing, welcoming tone, the interactive style I like, and I just try to amplify their voices. And so I just kind of give them more airtime, and when people come into the group, I reference these people, I say, talk to this person, this is what we're doing. And out of that, inside, I'd say the last half year, there's this phrase that I've started to use called creating a culture of listening. And the creating a culture of listening comes from when we did the Agile Manifesto meeting in 2001. People go, why did it work? Because I was in a lot of meetings, and a lot of people, a number of them, they wanted to write manifestos or stuff, and it didn't work. And the thing that was really magical in that meeting was that everybody came with very generous listening. People who were like arch enemies, we knew they really didn't, like each other's work, were super generous, never cut each other down, always tried to help the other person amplify their intention and what they were saying. And that was the meeting with the best quality of listening that I've ever been in before or since. So I keep going back over that, and I'm going, if we could amplify the quality of listening, that would make such a big change in the outcomes of all of these things. So now I'm making it as a subtext, since I really only have 4 words to offer you, right? Collaborate, deliver, reflect, improve. So I'm adding on to that our intention is to create a culture of listening. We don't tell people, we dialogue. So some people said, hey, Alistair, I want to take this to my execs. I want to be a certified Heart of Agile consultant, leader, teacher, whatever thing. Tell me what I have to tell the execs. And I had to say, no, I won't tell you what to tell the execs. I'll dialogue with you about how you dialogue with the execs, but there's no telling going on anywhere inside the Heart of Agile. And so we've taken that as a kind of again, inside the personality as a foundational way of operating, as listening and dialoguing, right? And so that then is, when I take that out on Twitter, and the one woman said, women are afraid to submit because your call makes it look like you're setting the bar too high, so we're afraid to submit. So I go, okay, then coach me how to not sound intimidating as a male asking for contributions, right? So that's what we're doing, and I'm glad you asked the question, because if we talk about collaborate, inside of the collaborate box is this difference between telling and listening, right? So we're just trying to create a culture of listening. Next question.
Any more questions?
This is England, so I'm sure there are lots of questions.
Hi, Alistair. My name is John Turley. Thank you for the work you're doing. Brilliant stuff. So I get what you said about collaborating being one of your key words, right? I get why. I get that in order to get people to collaborate, they need to trust each other. You can't make people trust each other, obviously. So I keep finding that I can bring people from a diverse area or diverse areas of the organization together into a room and say, right, now you guys need to collaborate, you're all responsible for the delivery of some value, that kind of good stuff. They can even all agree that they're going to do this thing called collaboration, and then I sort of step away and no collaboration a week later. And do you find the same thing? Do you find that thing occurring?
Yeah.
And if so, how do you deal with it?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I used to not have an answer. I'd say, yeah, people are tough, and that's the same the world over. But we're collecting stories now using the solution focus approach. So first of all, we've created a thing called collaboration cards. So this is a result from research I did about 12 years ago or some number. And in theory, there's a website called collaborationcards.com. And if you go there, you'll see I am the worst website designer in the entire world. Kindergartners can probably do better than I do, but it's there. And we have these cards, and they're now in 3 languages. They're in English, French, and Spanish. And they give the research that I did was what are specific movements or actions that people can take to improve the inclination to collaborate on a minute-by-minute basis, on a moment-by-moment basis. And I've never seen a book or an article about it. And there's little things like lower your relative social position, inquire, don't contradict, get a result, give people airtime, recognize others. But they're down to the individual, almost body movements that will increase or decrease. So actually, some people are using those inside meetings, inside team reflections, inside courses, because they sensitize people to the little movements that make or break the inclination to collaborate. It's in the trust thing. The other one, the bigger one, is I mentioned solution-focused psychotherapy, and you guys are in England, and the leaders of this are down in they're in London and Brighton. I went to Brighton to take a 2-day course. The guy's name is Chris Iveson, I believe. And it's called Solution Focus Brief, and I think the brief is the name of the company. So you guys have got that local, and I flew there and took that class to learn this. And the general idea there, this is the one we're all anchoring on, is you don't go ever for a big change. It suits my personality. I'm not a macro change person. I'm a micro change person. But basically you say, on a scale of 1 to 10, how is trust? Or it works better if you break it down to all the elements of trust, whatever you break it down. You say, you get a group and you say, okay, what are the things that make trust work, right? And you have them name, stuff, and they dot vote and pick out the 5 most crucial things for getting a collaborative environment going or a trusting environment going, whatever. So you break it down, it works a little bit better. And then you say on a scale of 1 to 10, where are we now? Where 1 means it's not present and 10 means it's present all the time. And you'll usually get a number anywhere between, let's say, 2.5 and 7. We'll just take that. And the point now where solutions-focused coaching goes to is it says, if you're even at a 2.5, which means you think it sucks and it's terrible, it means you have at least some example of it partially present somewhere. So you go find those examples and you list all the places it's happening. And then you say, okay, was it a 2.5? That's really pretty sucky. I agree. What are the smallest things we can do to get up to a 2.6? So you don't try to jump from a 2 to a 7. You go from 2.5 to 2.6, 3 to 3.5, etc. And for the special issue of Qatar, I'm trying to get my friend and colleague Jerry Derbier in Paris has a story of a company that's over 3 years. They don't work with the IT department. They work with the company as a whole. And the leaders, it's a family-owned company, and the leaders of the company have really settled in on this concept of micro changes. They don't want macro changes. They just have lots of little micro changes happening in the company, and then you see the whole company starts to shift around, and it's a much more pleasant place to work now than it was 2 or 3 years ago. So that's my, the advice. I told you I would tell stories rather than just giving advice. Now, the stories of the collaboration cards, solution-focused brief, and micro changes. Just look for ways, like just 1/10 of a point at a time.
Brilliant.
Next question.
Any more questions?
Alistair. My name is James Bell. You talk quite a lot about solution-focused psychotherapy. Can you just give a bit more of a detail as to why you think that's important and why that's underpinning a lot of the things that you've been talking about so far?
Yeah. So it turns out that the experts in this are from England. Andy Pulse in London is a friend of mine, introduced me to a guy called Mark McCargow. Mark McCargow was big in the solution focus work. I met him in 2005. He's now in Edinburgh. So I would say at the level, so here's to back up your question one step. Here's something for you guys to think about. Why does anybody accept anything? Right? So some people love XP, extreme programming, some hate it, some love Scrum, some hate it, right? There's no data for any of this in general. So we accept stuff not based on data. And my take is we accept things at the level of personality. Like people go, that sounds about right to me, or it feels good to me, tends to be the acceptance criteria for an idea, right? So in all of my work and all of my, I don't call them retrospectives, I call them reflection workshops. My favorite is to say, what do we keep out of what we're doing today and what do we want to try differently? And I try never to list the things that are not working. Because in my personality, I don't want to see a list of all the things that were not working. We know what they are. Say one and let's brainstorm things we can do to get out of that, right? So I want to see posted on the wall what our initiative is to work on this month. I don't want to see a list of stuff that was broken last month. That's not going to cheer me up at all, right? So I was already at the level of personality into don't tell me about what's wrong with the past, tell me about what we should focus on in the future. So I was kind of like half in this camp. And then Mark McCargow, and I called it, after I listened to him, I called it the delta-delta method. So there's a big delta that got you how far you've come. And you ask the question, what's the tiny little baby delta you can move forward? And I said, that's interesting. You know, I guess I could get behind that. And I didn't do anything with it. And then my friend Jerry Derbier started doing things with it and found good responses amongst his clients and organizations. And then I went and took the class, and it's a formal approach in which you never give any advice. You only ask for people to, like, give a description of a preferred future and a small delta that might help them to get there. And the solution-focused psychotherapy school has an outrageous success rate, far better, and they have data, you know, which it's fine. I'll take them at the word. They have the data. So for me and for us, when you have a difficult situation at the level of my personality, I'm happy to ask people to make micro, tiny changes. And then the experience is after they make micro, tiny changes, they get in the habit of making changes and they go, oh, these little changes thingies work. We could do more little changes as long as we don't have to make big changes, right? So at the level of my personality, the people I hang out with, at the level of data inside the psychotherapy groups, it's coming on as a very promising approach. I'll put it that way. It's not intrinsic to the Heart of Agile, but it's a current topic and seems to be doing well. So that's the long answer for that question.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Thank you. How do you go about influencing people whose view is that it's the manager or boss's responsibility to do improvements and facilitate collaboration?
Oh, that's interesting. I'm generally never give advice. So there's a category of questions I've made a policy not to answer over the years. And yours comes very close to stepping into that one. I'll tell you what it is. And many questions look like this. How can I get that person over there who doesn't agree with me to change their way of working to the way I want them to work and think, right? And first of all, I don't want to answer that because if there was a way to answer that, then Kim Jong of North Korea would get a hold of it. And it would become a technology, right? And I don't like that thought. I don't happen to think it's possible, and I don't like the potential. So I keep myself away from ever answering any question of that variety, right? And your question came like really close to that. But my habit, I would say, if I'm talking with someone that has a really different view than I do, is to first try to agree with them. So I try to not be binary in any of my discussions, but I put everything on a gradient. So, for example, a simple one, because I should tell stories, right? I go to this project, and there's a sort of a classically trained project manager there, and the Agile team says, oh my God, we've got this horrible waterfall-y project PMI, PMP, project manager dude, right, who won't let us do any iterations and rework. So I go to him and I say, does it ever happen on your projects that you ever do any rework? And he goes, well, yeah. I said, well, would you actually ever pay to do any rework? And he said, well, yeah. And I go, okay, so we have a basis for agreement. Now, maybe you and I disagree as to how much you would pay and when you would pay, but let's be on a dialogue of when you would pay and when you wouldn't pay, right? But now you see we're on the same dialogue. We're not in opposition anymore. We're finding where we are on this gradient. And being on this gradient, then we can agree to disagree on where, but we're in a constructive discussion at that moment. Are you seeing that? Right? So that would be my, that's my go-to if it's really confrontational, very different opposing views, is I try to find a place to put it on a gradient and say, okay, so we differ by this degree on there. And at some point you have to let go and say, all right, that's, on you go with your life and I'm going on with my life, whatever.
Thank you.
I will add one thing. The collaboration cards have kind of changed some of the answers because my number two person, whose name is Soledad Pinter, you can look her up, uses these collaboration cards all the time. And these are really great in your retrospectives or reflection workshops, or in classes, or they're great in execs, everybody. And you have people play with them, and she hands them out, and she says, everybody pick a card. Now, and then she borrows from the solution focus thing, and she says, talk about when you have seen that in play. And then talk about if you can see to do any of that yourself. Now, when you do that with people, it doesn't matter at what level of the organization they are, they start to see that they can do things on their own.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's my answer. One more question, maybe?
Sure. Last question. All right, we've got one now.
Hi. So starting a new team, which is kind of doing this transformation in sort of the heart of Agile, where do you think would be the best point to start?
Boy, I'll tell you, different people choose different quadrants. The general one is people start with the collaboration. That's just a natural go-to. Some people start with reflection because you have to start by reflecting. The ones that Jerry and Sole do the most in organizations is they literally put up the 4 words and have people dialogue around them. So for instance, Jerry might say, hey guys, list all the things that you've had on good projects and good environments that you'd like to see show up again that you think are like critical or something. And people brainstorm and put them up. And then he'll put the 4 words up and he'd say, or put the X up and say, put the stickers on the quadrant that you think they belong. And now this just starts a dialogue, right? And they might say, is there one of those that you think that you can influence like a half a point on a scale of 1 to 10? You can do a tenth of a point or a half a point that you see an action that you can do to improve one of those. So that's actually using the 4 and doing that kind of, delta kind of a discussion is a common way to start. So those are the 3 ways that people have started.
All right. Thank you very much. And again, thank you, Alistair, for taking time out to join us here today. I think everyone will be in agreement and there were some really good answers. I believe if that's everything.
Yeah. So all I would just say is go to heartofagile.com. We don't have a ton of stuff there, but there's a little bit about expanding it. There's references to, there's some videos of my talks. You can find stuff in Spanish and French if you're so inclined. But just explore around there and see what you find.
All right. Well, thanks a lot.
Thank you. See you guys.